Good morning.
Am I on? Good.
It's not every day you get a call out of the blue from one of your friends, Kevin Messini, to ask you to come and speak on Pathfinder Day. That was unusual. I was sitting there kind of just saying, huh? Really? Wow, that's interesting. So here I am. And thanks to Ed and Steve, I appreciate the invitation of you, the church. It's a thrill to be here because there's lots of things happening in the world, and in my line of work, I deal with a lot of complexities, whether it's church-state constitutional law, church-state constitutional history, Title VII law when it comes to religious discrimination in the workplace, foreign policy, political science, international religious freedom policy, all of that stuff is what we are engaged in. And every January, every fourth Sabbath in January, you take up a Liberty offering to support Liberty Magazine. But you're not just supporting a magazine. You're supporting not only the litigation fund for the North American Division, which comes back to support us and every union and every conference where church members have problems in the workplace. When they need an attorney to defend them, you fund those costs. But you fund not only the costs for that, but you also fund what's called the Northwest Religious Liberty Association. The Northwest Religious Liberty Association is your government relations program at the North Pacific Union Conference. We have capital pastors that cover every single capital in the Northwest: Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. And I train these guys, and we also have a team of attorneys that cover our courts. And we are active for you, very active, in fact. We're hoping to launch a Washington Workplace Religious Freedom Act that models the bill that we passed in Oregon, known as the Oregon Workplace Religious Freedom Act, which makes it easier for you to be accommodated in the workplace, not just you, but all people of faith, because it puts a greater burden on employers to demonstrate that they at least have, in order to say that it's an undue hardship on their business in order to accommodate you, to deny you that accommodation, they have to demonstrate that it's a significant cost to their business and a significant administrative difficulty. Prior to that, the standard, at least in the state of Washington, it currently exists, that standard is that all an employer has to do is show that it's a de minimis or a minimal cost or an administrative inconvenience, and they can deny you an accommodation. So that's the way it stands. And currently there's a case before the Washington State Supreme Court that may decide a lot of things, but if it doesn't, we are going to be there. In fact, we're going to encourage legislators in advance to put forward a Washington Workplace Religious Freedom Act, regardless of what the Washington State Supreme Court decides, because right now it's front and center before all the legislators. So now's the time to strike the iron while it's hot. So anyway, please remember us on the Sabbath of January 25th. Please give generously, because every dollar you give, 10% of that comes back to support your government relations program. Now, if you think that that occurs in every union conference and all throughout the North American Division, you would be wrong. I'm sad to say, and this is something I'm trying to get started, so I tell the people wherever I go, not to air dirty laundry, but to encourage you as a chorus to say, hey, let's get with it, church. We need representation in every state capital in the United States. We are the only established professional, bona fide, trained, established government relations program in the entire North American Division. The entire North American Division. We've been that way for 15 years now. But there's a fellow down in Sacramento in California that works for the Pacific Union Conference, and so there's 6 states that are covered. That means 44 states have no representation. And they don't take it as important as they should. And so it has been my burden the last 15 years working at the North Pacific Union Conference to try to get the North American Division to see this as a serious matter. So I'm hoping someday that will happen. I don't know if it will, but I believe that our ministry is to defend the Constitution, which is to protect religious freedom for all people of faith, not just Seventh-day Adventists. That extends our ministry even wider. So that's what we're here for, and that ministry needs to be at every state capital, because I believe that it's a Daniel ministry. It's a ministry that we need to have in every state. Amen? Thank you. So shout it from the hilltops, will you? I need your help. I appreciate the reading of the scripture this morning. In Revelation 17, we have a picture of something that's very serious, but something that's also very glorious, something that is just magnificent, in fact. It actually suggests a culmination of all of Earth's history, and it paints a picture of a time of trouble and a second coming with Jesus coming to rescue his people. Amen. Isn't that a beautiful picture? I mean, it's fearful in one sense, but it's glorious and reassuring in another sense. It says, the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. I am not one who believes that you can just symbolize everything away in Revelation. I believe that current events and things that are happening on the ground are important for us to watch as a people. And if we don't watch carefully, we will be caught off guard. Now, if there is a personal thing you can take away, a lesson for your own personal daily walk from today's sermon, it is that we are saved through Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. Amen. We're not saved by kings. We're not saved by churches. Yeah, that's right. You're not saved by your church. You're saved by Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. You're not saved by religious leaders. You're not saved by any holy man. You're not saved by your nation. Your nation cannot save you. We are saved through Jesus Christ alone. And if our reliance is not completely upon Jesus, we will not be found among those described here as called, chosen, and faithful followers. That's kind of a hard reality, isn't it, to think about? But that's really what Revelation is saying. It's saying if we want to be called, chosen, and faithful followers, our reliance needs to be completely on Jesus Christ. That's something the disciples had a hard time learning during their sojourn with Christ on earth. And it's certainly something very hard for us today as well. Now, who are the 10 horns? Now, this is important. I'm going to walk through and give you a little bit of detail here because I'm going to give you Greg Hamilton's version, how's that, of Revelation. And for me, this is vitally important to understand because I'm going to be sharing some very important things having to do with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I'm going to have a lot of things to say about the ecumenical movement, especially the interfaith left movement. I believe that religious freedom is being attacked on two sides, two fronts, by the Christian right, who would do away with the separation of church and state and join them ever more closely together, and by the religious interfaith left, which is more of a global movement that I think is equally, if not greater, danger upon us today, that I will describe to you. And it's not something that we normally look at, and so what I'm going to be sharing with you is fairly fresh and fairly new. The 10 horns have always been depicted as the leaders of Europe, okay? The 10 toes in Daniel chapter 2, and, representing 10 kingdoms, and then 3 fell away, the Heruli, the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals, I guess it is, those 3. I hope I got that right. Sometimes I don't always keep up with the old stuff, the old information. It's that's why it pays to go to Revelation seminars all the time to keep up with that fundamental stuff. So the 10 horns here is it just a depiction of Europe at this point? And the final Earth's at the final Earth's culmination of Earth's history, is this just Europe? It can't be. There's no way it can be Europe, and the reason why is because it includes the beast, and the beast here is something that's even larger than what's described in Revelation 13. In Revelation 13, we have two beasts. We have verses 1 through 10. If you've ever studied Revelation 13, if you haven't, and this is going over your heads, I don't apologize, but I want you to follow with me. And that is, the first 10 verses of Revelation 13 outline the ancient Holy Roman Empire, known as the papacy or the Vatican, that for 1,260 years pretty much dominated and controlled and manipulated kings and emperors in Earth's history. Okay? And that was where the church controlled the state. Okay? And that's a significant time period, that 1,260-year time period in prophecy that's talked about all through Daniel, whether it's described as 42 months, 3.5 years, et cetera, et cetera. 1,260 days, day for year, 1,260 years. So here, you have something that's bigger than that. Because in the second part of Revelation 13, you have a description of a lamb-like beast that comes up out of the earth, representing a new world, newness, the land rush, the gold rush, entrepreneurship, wealth, opportunity. That represents the United States of America, and specifically evangelical America, because it rises up like a lamb, having spiritual characteristics and also suggesting that it was coming for freedom. And so America rises up, Protestant America rises up as a counter reaction, so to speak, to the old world, the papal world of dominating kings and emperors, of the old world. So you have the new world, all described there in Revelation 13. But in Revelation 13, this lamb-like beast, known as Protestant America, the United States of America, in verse 12, it goes on to say that there's an alliance that takes place between the first beast of Revelation 13, 1 through 10, Rome, okay, and the United States, thus seeking to heal the mortal wound that the papacy had received. We as Seventh-day Adventists pretty much believe that occurred in several ways. Vatican II is a big step, but also appointing a permanent ambassador to the Vatican in 1984 by President Ronald Reagan, okay? Reaching the hands across the Gulf and grasping hands with Rome. Right now, as we speak, Vladimir Putin is meeting with Pope Francis I to talk about world affairs and trying to twist his arm to Russia's point of view. And that takes place, or that took place. The reason why they were able to do that is they established diplomatic ties with Mikhail Gorbachev just shortly after Reagan established full diplomatic ties with the Vatican in 1985. And so the two world powers sought Rome's guidance and help. And so it naturally suggests, Revelation 13, verse 12, that such alliances would occur between world leaders, that the wound would slowly begin to heal, and that world leaders would come to consult with Rome more and more. Okay? And then we have the threefold union of the lamb-like beast with spiritualism. And spiritualism here can be described as many things. For me, it represents, in verse 13, this fire coming down out of heaven to earth in full view of men, that deceives the whole world, by the way, it says in verse 14, is this worldwide ecumenical movement. The world sees that the political leaders aren't getting the job done, so they turn to ecumenical unity in order to make it happen. Today, we see protest after protest all around the world. I have a cover of Economist magazine I won't show to you because of certain things on the picture that are not viewable in the church, but Economist magazine, a secular magazine, news magazine similar to Time and others, shows the march of protest, a woman carrying a French flag, describing the French, or depicting the French Revolution. And then 1848, the grand revolution that engulfed all of Europe. And then it shows 1968, America and Europe, engulfed with the hippie movement, the movement that I was just a kid with, and many of you were just a kid during that time. The age of Kennedy's assassination, which we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of I believe today. Yesterday, thank you. And then the next depiction, 1989, the fall of the Soviet Empire, due to the grand revolts and protests all over Eastern Europe. And then it depicts a woman in 2013, and it depicts a little caption below, everywhere. And the article goes on to state that the world is in a flame, is ablaze, okay, with protests everywhere. People are fed up with their governments, with their leaders, and they are turning more and more to their religious leaders for guidance, for support, for wisdom. And it's not surprising because Revelation 17 describes this very event, in my opinion. You see, these kings who come together in verse 12, the 10 horns in Revelation 17, verse 12, you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They are coming together, led by America, Rome, and the religious world. You might say, well, the United States is a bit weak. Well, yes, but as one political scientist from Princeton University, John G. Eikenberry, describes in his book, Liberal Leviathan, The Origins, Crisis, and Transformation of the American World Order, he says that really what's happening is other nations are just wanting to have more of a place at the table. They expect the United States to lead. They don't diminish America's leadership. They want us to lead. They just want us to include them more. That's all. And I think he has a sound perspective. Now, these 10 kings, I think, could be representative of the United Nations Security Council, could be representative of the G8, the Global 8, the Global Economic 8, or the Global Economic 20, the leading nations of the world. Ellen White, in early writings, page 282, described world leaders with these words. She called them the leading men of the earth. And so you have to think that they're representative of the powers of the earth in general. So the powers of the earth come together with the beast, which the beast here is a threefold power in Revelation 17:12. So when you read the beast, it's not just the lamb-like beast, it's not just Rome, it's the United States, Rome, and the religious world. Okay? So it's combined together. So it's basically the whole world coming together and arrayed against God's people. All right? That's the picture here. It says they have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb. But the Lamb will overcome, will triumph over them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Okay. Now let's get you down onto the ground with current events. In 2007, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia made a visit, a first-time visit, a huge visit that was all over the news, and for some reason, I don't know why we as a church didn't pick up on it, but made a visit to the Vatican, made a visit to Pope Benedict XVI. Now, at this time, world leaders were kind of distancing themselves from Pope Benedict. At this time, the pedophilia scandals were raging all across the globe, and his popularity was going down because he gave a speech in 2005 in his hometown of Regensburg, Germany, where he started out his speech saying that he was quoting King Mehmet of Persia, where he says that Muslims are inherently evil and violent, okay? And then he goes on with the rest of his speech to say this is not true, that they are indeed rational and that we can have ecumenical dialogue. But of course, at that point, nobody heard the rest of the speech, and the whole world was ablaze, the whole Muslim world was ablaze, and of course, that broke diplomatic relations between Muslim leaders worldwide with the Vatican. Severed it strongly. In fact, the current Pope, who was then Archbishop of Argentina, Jorge Murillo Bergoglio, chastised openly in the press Pope Benedict XVI, saying this is not what we need in terms of leadership in Rome. He's now the current pope. I find that interesting and ironic. That was openly in the press. But when King Abdullah came to the Vatican, two things emerged from their visit. An agreement for two things. A first in history, in world history. The building of two Roman Catholic cathedrals, one in Riyadh, one in Jeddah. Huge, okay? They're already finished being built, okay? And that's a big deal in Saudi Arabia. Not only that, but he brokered an agreement with the Pope, with the agreement of the world leaders, the G20 and specifically the G8, to host a human rights convention. Human rights, did you hear me? Human rights convention in Saudi Arabia. Okay, and to urge that more seats be given on the Human Rights Council of the United Nations to Muslim countries. Okay, which he achieved. All right, he held the Human Rights Council and so on in Saudi Arabia and so on. Now, their version of religious freedom is interesting because it's not religious freedom, number one. And we'll talk more about that this afternoon in our lecture, Islam and America's Christian Nation Debate. What were the constitutional founders' intentions? And it's not so much focused on Islam. It's focused more on the founding fathers and what was the intent. I will demonstrate that the founding fathers did indeed intend the separation of church and state, and much more to an extent than you might even think today. This is my area of expertise in church-state constitutional law and history from Baylor University at the J.M. Dawson Institute of Church-State Studies. I share that with you only because it's been a passion of mine for years, even while pastoring for years. In 2009, several things started to occur at the United Nations as a result of this visit by King Abdullah to the Vatican. Their version of religious liberty was this. Their whole intent of the Organization of Islamic Communities, which is known as the OIC, it's 57 nations, Islamic nations, most of them religious states, controlled by their mullahs, said that we want to amend Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which allows for total freedom of speech and your right to evangelize anywhere in the world. That every member of the United Nations signs that and says that, yes, we will uphold Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which mirrors the U.S. Constitution of the Free Exercise and Establishment Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Okay? But they wanted to amend it to state that we do not allow for any defamation of religion. That is, if anybody says anything against Muhammad, if anybody says anything against Rome, or anything against anybody, there's to be punishment, and that punishment is to be exacted autonomously by each nation to decide for themselves what kind of punishment is meted out. Okay? And you say, well, okay, where did that go? What does that have to do with anything? It was pretty scary for a while. In 2009, prior to 2009, between 2007 and 2009, they came very close to passing anti-defamation language, an amendment to Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the Human Rights Council at the United Nations. They came very, very close. Nations that served on it was countries like Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Libya, and so on and so forth. Anything but representative of religious freedom or human rights. And yet, this was gaining steam. In 2009, when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, she decided to go to war against this type of thinking and decided this has to change the United Nations or our way of life as we know it is doomed in terms of the Western way. So in 2009, a group of more than 200 civil society organizations from 46 countries, including Muslim, Christian, moderate Muslim, Christian, Jewish, secular humanist, and atheist groups, signed a joint petition urging the Human Rights Council to reject a resolution regarding defamation of religion. Beginning in 2009, negative votes together with abstentions were more numerous than the number of votes in favor of the various defamations resolutions. But notice this is kind of both hilarious and sad. For instance, the March 2009 Human Rights Council resolution resulted in a vote of 23 in favor, 11 opposed, and 13 abstentions. So there was more votes for than opposed, but you put together the abstentions with the opposed, they outnumbered the votes for. It's very telling, isn't it? And then, in 2010, when the Third Committee of the General Assembly voted on a defamation of religion resolution introduced by Morocco in behalf of the OIC, or the Organization of Islamic Countries, the resolution was adopted by a vote of 76 in favor, 64 against, and 42 abstentions. Very interesting. Well, in 2011, Hillary Clinton had so beat back the tide, so to speak, both in speeches publicly here in the United States and in Europe and overseas when she made visits in Islamic countries, specifically in Saudi Arabia, which they did not appreciate. But she stated very clearly that religious freedom must be and freedom of speech must be exact, must be full, must be complete. We will not retract anything to harm anybody's right to freedom of expression and freedom of religion as a basic, fundamental human right. And so right now, it's kind of at bay. Secretary of State John Kerry has been wrestling with this because there's still a new head of steam by these Islamic countries, the Organization of Islamic Countries, to continue to keep this before the United Nations Human Rights Council. In 2012, something very significant happened. The Pope Benedict XVI made a visit. It was apparently ended up being his last diplomatic visit to another country. And it was to Lebanon. And it was to visit the Maronite Patriarch Bakar of Lebanon. And just as he landed, reports were all over the newspapers. It was just going crazy because this video had gone viral on YouTube. Somebody had created a movie on Islam in Los Angeles at that time, denouncing Muhammad, and the Middle East was ablaze once again, okay, with outrage, with protest. In fact, Al-Qaeda groups took advantage of this in Libya, and that's when the attack occurred on our U.S. Embassy in Libya, killing our ambassador to Libya, and so on and so forth. You probably remember that, don't you? You know, the Benghazi scandal, you've heard of all that, you know. Okay, you've heard probably too much of that. A lot of very few facts out there that are put forward. But the problem is, what happened was this Maronite leader, Christian, there in Lebanon, said this film was not only offensive to Muslims and the Prophet, but also to Christians and all other religions, and that simply condemning the film was not enough. He went on to say in the Associated Press that you, the Pope, need to go back to the Vatican and you need to quit opposing this effort to amend Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You need to side with the Islamic community in order to create worldwide peace. In the name of world peace, the religious communities need to come together. East and West needs to come together. Muslims in the East and Christians in the West, we need to come together. And this is a perfect opportunity. And Benedict, who had always been opposed, had sided with the U.S., opposing any amendments to Article 18, said that he would go back and look at it. Well, in a matter of months, he announces that he's stepping down. And of course, the College of the Cardinals met and emerges, and who emerges? Pope Francis I, the Archbishop of Argentina, Jorge Mario Bergoglio. who was denunciatory of Benedict because he thought that he had totally ruined the ecumenical movement forward. He, more than anybody else, wants to restore the legacy of John Paul II in restoring dialogue with Islam. This whole defamation of religion thing becomes a huge international push-button issue on the international stage that very few, in my opinion, are watching. And I share this with you because I really believe that it lines up perfectly with Revelation 17, 12 to 14 in terms of worldwide attempt at union. Now, I'll be honest with you. I'm one of those guys who am not into what I call wild-eyed conspiracy theories. I just have a real hard time with that. When I go to research something, I have an academic temperament, and that is never assume a conspiracy. Never assume a conspiracy because you're starting on the wrong foot, okay? If you're starting on the wrong foot, it will mislead you. This particular movement that I see happening is a very serious one because what gave it impetus was something that President Barack Obama did when he first became president. And this is the third part of my talk today. And this is not to condemn the president because there have been several other presidents that were moving in the same direction in terms of language. Condoleezza Rice under George W. Bush, Madeleine Albright under Bill Clinton was striving for this language shift as diplomatic language from the full, absolute guarantee of religious freedom versus the language of tolerance. They've been moving more and more towards tolerance, taking a step backwards, so to speak, in order to meet the Islamic countries and other countries, third world countries, where they're at. Where does this all come from? I'll share that with you in a minute. It's based on Samuel Huntington's former professor from Harvard, who wrote the Pulitzer Prize-winning work, The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order, which I'll be sharing a little bit more with you as we go along. Because he said that the world community no longer, Article 18 has become a joke to the world community. Here's what Article 18 says. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public and private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practices, worship, and observance. And the Free Speech Clause, Article 19, says everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. I was in Romania for a month in March this year, giving speeches at the Parliament, giving speeches before 2 law schools, and before 14 town hall meetings, before Romanian Orthodox priests, Protestant leaders, Catholic leaders, senators, so on. And it was a grueling tour of over 4,000 plus kilometers in 1 month. And I kind of adopted Romania as my other country in terms of trying to urge democratic reform constitutionally. But they, in their constitution of Article 29, their freedom of religion, and Article 30, is really representative of all of Eastern Europe and most of the world, including Russia. And that is, they have the statement, we guarantee religious freedom, and then you go down a few lines, several sections, and there's defamation of religion language there. So it's not the full guarantee of religious freedom. It's what I call the Eastern model. Eastern model. Well, Samuel Huntington says that in order to have world peace, in order to achieve world peace, there must be international consensus. And to achieve international consensus, the entire world needs to come together and agree on a basis of agreement. And specifically, he argues in his book, The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order, that we must take a step back away from the high standard for religious freedom outlined by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have to meet the rest of the world where they're at and take a step back from the full guarantee of religious freedom to the standard of mere tolerance. Now you say, what's wrong with tolerance? Well, The problem with tolerance is the following. Let me get to Barack Obama's speeches. He spoke before the Turkish parliament, and then he spoke in Egypt in 2009, and that was just before the Arab Spring, so-called Arab Spring. And then he went on to speak in Indonesia, Jakarta, Indonesia. And it was the Jakarta speech, more than any other speech, that was most interesting. He lauded the Indonesian constitution and their sense of religious tolerance. The problem is, when he was lauding their constitution, he mentioned by name Pancasila, which is the essence of their constitution. It's a 5-point preamble to their constitution. And Pancasila essentially means peaceful coexistence. Now, what does that mean? In Indonesia, you have the largest number of Muslims in the world, by far. 75% of the Muslim world is located in Indonesia, not in the Middle East. Most people don't know that. And so he went on to say that Pancasila is the following. I'm kind of losing it here. I need some water. Some water would really help. Do you have some water? Just a sip or a drop, I don't care. I don't care if it's borrowed. I'll drink it. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Thanks, that will help get some water in my head. Pancasila would be equivalent to the following. Let's say you represented all the religious leaders of the world, and you were in this one room. And if you wanted to share your faith with anybody in that room, you would have to ask permission from everybody in that room, and everybody in that room would have to agree. If one decided that you couldn't, then that means you would not be able to share your faith. Now you say that's unreal. Well, that's what I call collective censorship. And I belong to the Portland Interfaith Council of Greater Portland, sit on the board. And one of the things you will discover anytime we get together for interfaith meetings that include all religions, nobody's allowed to share their faith. It's anathema. It's uncalled for. It's an issue of collective censorship. The religious right, even though they're against separation of church and state, they are on the right side on this issue in regard to, hey, we have the freedom to share our faith. Now, you don't want to be belligerent about it. You want to be polite. That's true. You don't want to be hostile. And the word proselytize in Eastern cultures, including the entire Eastern world, means to coerce. It's another thing I learned in Romania. In the Western world, in the Christian world, that just means to share, to freely share, to evangelize. It's not a big deal. It's like we should have the freedom to do that. And so you have this clash of civilizations between East and West over this issue. So you have those who want to amend Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and you have those who don't. This becomes very interesting. And let me just add one more point. To bring it into U.S. history, to take a step back towards tolerance, away from the constitutional and equal guarantee of religious freedom for everyone, to move back to the model of tolerance, religious tolerance, which is what you would do with the insertion of defamation language to amend Article 18, it would be like the days of the Puritans, the Puritan colonies, which basically said, you Baptists, you Quakers, you Catholics, you Jews, and maybe you one or two Muslims, you have a right to peacefully coexist with us. But you do not have a right to evangelize any of us, okay? And those of you Puritans, guess what? You don't have a right to change your belief. That's equivalent to blasphemy. And you were either put in stocks, you were fined, you were tortured, you were punished, or you were put to death. Correct? That's the old Massachusetts Bay Colony standard. And so to take a step backward in the name of world peace, in my opinion, is prophetic. And it's dangerous. Now, John Kerry has been all over this. When the 2012 International Religious Freedom Report came out, he expressed concern about the growth of laws governing blasphemy and apostasy around the world. He said, whether it be a single deity or multiple deities or no deities at all, freedom to believe, including the freedom not to believe, is a universal human right. He said the use of blasphemy and apostasy laws was a significant problem, as was the continued proliferation of such laws around the world. He said, another troubling trend is the increasing use of laws governing blasphemy and apostasy. These laws, he said, are frequently used to repress dissent, to harass political opponents, and to settle personal vendettas. Laws such as these violate fundamental freedoms of expression and religion, and we believe they ought to be repealed. And probably the worst offender other than Saudi Arabia is Pakistan, if you haven't noticed that. In the aftermath of the Pussy Riots trial in Russia, you may have recalled that on television, the Duma, the Russian Duma has come together to nationalize not only the Russian Orthodox Church, but to amend their constitution to anybody who expresses intolerance toward anyone who attempts to criticize the church. It's considered defamation of religion. So you see this conflict. You see this. I'm watching this conflict internationally as to what's happening now, and it's very serious. It's very deadly. So why do I share these things with you? Because I believe, friends, that a great battle, a great controversy is taking place on earth. And there are forces of good and there are forces of evil. And I really believe that we need to have our eyes open. If anything, our worldviews, our opinions need to be informed. That alone can change your life. If you want a practical guide to what this sermon will do for you today, we need to not be just informed, but we need to realize that, again, as I started out with this sermon, that our salvation is not by relying on anyone. We have to rely on Jesus Christ and Him alone. Not on any nation, not on any king, not on any president, not on any nation. Friends, I'm not here to knock any one religion. I'm not here to knock our president, who I greatly admire, and some of you may not. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to state, and by the way, I tend to be an admirer of all of our presidents. Just to get there is pretty tough. I have been, as I say it on Facebook with people, I said, you may oppose this person, that person. I said, hey, I liked Nixon, I liked Carter, I liked Ford, I liked Reagan. I pray for all of them. And I think we need to as well. That's a hard job. It's difficult. And they each come with their own visions and ideologies. It's true. Some of them we might like, some of them we may not like. But just remember that God sets up kings and takes down kings. And I really believe that if we're going to be of the true spirit and right spirit, we need to pray for our president. I believe that as the world becomes more and more disjointed and we see more and more world disorder instead of world order, that's where I think we're going, friends. This idea that somehow we're going to create world order and we're going to have world unity and a one world government, I'll be honest with you, I think that's pure nonsense. I think leaders are struggling so hard to make things work. And there's just no possible way. They are just absolutely beside themselves. In fact, we're told in early writings, page 282, if you want to look at it, it's Ellen White's first description of the time of trouble, first written description. If you want to get some of her early impressions in her writings, I urge you to go to early writings, the book Early Writings, and look up page 282. She says that convulsions spread the earth, natural catastrophes, natural disasters, that is. There's riots worldwide. There's just total. It's a total time of instability worldwide. Plagues are falling, the whole bit, okay? And the leaders are beside themselves as to what to do. And it says that they sign a decree. It says the leading men of the earth sign a decree giving the people, okay, the peoples of the earth, the freedom to go hunt down and pursue these so-called troublemakers. And it's an interesting scene because like when the priests and the Roman soldiers were coming after Christ in Gethsemane, it says in Desire of Ages that angels surrounded Christ and the disciples and they fell back as dead men on the ground. She says that the same thing happens to God's people. They are protected. Christ allowed himself to be taken, to be crucified on our behalf. And yet, in that last day, during the time of trouble, not one of us, if we're alive at that time, will die, according to the Great Controversy, the book Great Controversy. That's what it says. And we will be protected by the angels of God. I think that's a beautiful scene. Those who are with him, who are called and chosen and faithful followers, they will triumph with the Lamb. And they will be ready to receive Christ at his second coming. Isn't it a glorious scene? Isn't it a glorious ending? I think it's wonderful because he's going to take us home to a new world, heaven itself. And after 1,000 years, in fact, during 1,000 years, let me point out one other thing in closing. Did you know during that 1,000-year millennium that God gives us the final judgment with no strings attached? We get to judge God. It's not rigged. He gives us the final judgment. Did you know that? That's pretty amazing, isn't it? I mean, think about that. You say, well, why would God do that? Well, because, you've had such a close relationship with Jesus that you want to do everything you can for him, but at the same time, you're going to look at that record objectively. There's no strings attached. God risks his character, everything, and lets you and me become the final judge. Isn't that amazing? I think that's just, that more than anything else just blows my mind. Thus, don't laugh or knock the whole bookkeeping and the records in heaven thing, you know? I think the records in heaven and the books in heaven are important, very important. So, Jesus is preparing us for eternity, my friends, and we should not be naive as to what's happening in the world today. May God bless each one of you, and my sympathies to the family who have lost a loved one, a dear loved one here in this church. My heart goes out to you and all the family members here. That's got to be hard. I know. I lost my dad 1.5 years ago. It's been tough. He was such a good guy. And my wife and I miss him terribly. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we know that you're coming very, very soon. We see the signs. The signs are evident and clear. Lord, I appreciate the fact that you have given us advance warning written in the book of Revelation to know what is happening even today as we speak. Lord, that's a tremendous revelation to give to one people, one church, through not only the scriptures, but your servant, Ellen G. White. I am just awed and amazed at how you've led this church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I believe that you have called us for such a time as this. We're not the only church. There are other followers in many other churches, many other denominations, non-denomination. Lord, you have souls that are ready to be saved in the Muslim faith. Lord, you want us to be saved. We are not anti-ecumenical, but we believe that you are calling each and every one of us as you lead us as individuals to you. May you guide each one of us, the globe over, to have that saving relationship with you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.